How's it, Cloud Gurus? And welcome to the Red Hat Certified System Administrator Prep Course. My name is Warren Bell, and I'll be your guide in this adventure, which will begin with an introduction. Right, so I suppose we should start by talking about this course itself. What we do in this course is based on Red Hat Enterprise Linux version 7, although we'll be using CentOS. CentOS is a binary compatible clone, if you will, of RHEL 7, except it's entirely free, so it suits our purposes perfectly. This course will prepare you for the RHCSA exam, the Red Hat Certified System Administrator, and it introduces all the topics that might come up in the exam, although, and I need to stress this, additional practice is a must. If you're very, very new to Linux, I highly recommend that you check out our CompTIA Linux Plus and LPIC exam combo, as it's an excellent primer if you're completely new to this. As for the exam itself, well, it's the first step along all Red Hat certification tracks. Now, the Red Hat certification tracks are the best known and most established globally. Everybody knows about them and they're well respected, so good choice. The exam is 2.5 hours long. There are 300 points assigned and the passing mark is 210 or 70%. Now, this is a purely practical, hands-on exam. So when we cover theory in this course, that's nice to know. Being able to do things, in other words, run commands, configure files, that's the important stuff. That is what you'll be tested on. This exam has a bit of a fearsome reputation, and that's not because of difficulty, that's because of time pressure. And that's why I said earlier that extra practice is an absolute must. Just being able to do these things isn't enough. You need to be able to do them quickly without having to rely too heavily on documentation and things like that. So it needs to be second nature, and how do you make something second nature? Practice. Simple as that. You wouldn't take one karate lesson and attack Chuck Norris, would you? No, not unless you're insane. So, very, very important. Please. As for Red Hat themselves, they produce one of the few commercially supported distributions. They're a massive global company, very, very successful. They're the largest, most established vendor. They're publicly listed under the ticker symbol RHAT. They're a platform as a service provider through their OpenShift platform. They're a big player in the cloud game, and their platform of choice is OpenStack. And of course, besides Linux, they've also open sourced and therefore given the world a few pieces of software you may have heard of: JBoss, Ansible, and KVM, to name a few. When it comes to Linux, one of my favorite ways to describe Linux is actually something a friend of mine said. Functionality is the aesthetic. If it works well, it is beautiful. Linux isn't designed to be easy to use, it's designed to be incredibly powerful. And it's evolved as fast as it has, thanks to the fact that it's open source. Let's talk open source for a moment, shall we? The open source philosophy is that collaborative and cooperative is always better than competitive. There's a really, really good essay written by a guy called Eric S. Raymond called The Cathedral and the Bazaar, where he dives into why it is that the fairly chaotic open source world, which is kind of like a bazaar, somehow produces superior software to the very serious and well-controlled world of the formal software companies, which are kind of like cathedrals. One of the things that makes open source so exciting is that it's socially driven rather than commercially driven, and it espouses complexity rather than complication. Now, those are two different things. If something is complex, it means it gives you options. If something is complicated, it means it takes options away from you. So Linux is complex, sure. There's a lot of moving parts, but you can do just about anything. For me, software or operating systems that say you can't do that because we didn't think it was a useful feature, so we didn't bother including it, that makes my life complicated because now I can't use my system for what I wish to use it for. Thanks to the open source decentralized development model, as well as the strong peer review, software evolves very, very rapidly, and to quote Linus Torvalds, with enough eyes, all bugs are shallow. And so the peer review ensures that what comes out the other end of this process is usually very, very good software. There's an old idiom that explains this. I don't know if you've heard it before. 2 heads are better than 1. That's almost always true unless they're on the same person. It's fairly self-explanatory. The more brain cycles you throw at a problem, the more likely you are to solve it elegantly. To prove this, I'm going to show you one of my favorite images on the internet. And this is the Linux family tree. I've had to turn it sideways so it kind of fits nicely. At the top are the original distributions that started it, so the top of the image is further back in time. And I will focus in on the Red Hat tree. That is a lot of innovation, and it's all been enabled by open source. Cool. Okay, well, I hope I've got you psyched for this. I look forward to seeing you in your first lesson.